morning, good afternoon, or good evening from wherever you're joining us from, whether that is Utah, Canada, South America. We've got people from everywhere. So if you're watching live or you're watching on the replay, let us know where you're watching from. We want to know. We are so excited today to have our amazing guest. Oh, this way. No, I don't know. Sam Williams. He is so awesome. I'm really excited for you guys to be able to hear from him. Our interview today will be about 20 to 30 minutes, and we're going to be talking about grappling with difficult discoveries when you are learning about your family. But first, a little bit of background on Sam. Why don't you tell us where you're joining us from, Sam?
I am in Norfolk, Virginia, so right on the East Coast, about 30 minutes away from the ocean.
Represent. East Coast is the best. I love Virginia. I grew up there. So that's Sam and I's little connection. Sam and I actually met at Roots Tech last year, which was super fun, and then we got to reconnect again this year. And then when we started this project, Olivia had the idea to bring together a lot of influential people in the genealogy community. We thought of Sam. So he joined us for as kind of a training, and not so much a training, but like an introduction to the experiment. And as we talked about it, he brought up that sometimes it's not always the happiest experience when you are learning about some family stories. And that's a really important point to talk about. It's not always easy breezy, perfect kind of thing. So that's what we have Sam on here to talk to us about today. So Sam, why don't you share with us first off, like a little bit of your thoughts on just some of the difficult discoveries people can find in their families?
Yeah, so, obviously with this experiment, we're looking at the good things, right? The healing that can come about when we're looking at our family history and learning about who we are and where we come from. And that in and of itself is a healing thing. But one of the things that I've discovered, and I think in reflecting on my own life and my family, is that this isn't always the experience that everyone is going to have. So some people, or really all of us at some point, are going to have a difficult discovery that we come to find. So some of those difficult things that we might be able to find, and I have a little bit of a list of a couple of different things that some people might find as a difficult discovery in their life. One of them is really common, and that's unknown parentage. So either we were adopted and we knew it, and now we're discovering the facts around that adoption, or we didn't know we were adopted, or that our parent isn't who we thought, and now we have to grapple with that. I mean, it's a real problem, and it's something that's relatively common. Another one is we take a DNA test, and we find out that a close family member had a situation of infidelity or a child out of wedlock. That might be a difficult situation depending on the generation, right? Maybe my generation, it's not a big deal, but my parents' generation, their parents' generation, huge deal. Different issues with mental health and addiction. We either will see the evidence of it, or we'll see the newspaper articles, or we'll hear the family story, or we'll find out someone was shunned, and we're like, why was our side of the family shunned? I don't get it. Yeah. I love my grandfather. Or another thing, especially with DNA testing and with ethnicity results, is finding out surprising ethnic origins in our family. Either we weren't expecting a certain ethnicity, or we see the one that we were expecting isn't there at all. And these are things that people have to deal with in some way. And sometimes it goes through all the stages of grief. We have denial, we get angry, we eventually have some sort of sense of resolution. And it really just depends on the person and the amount of support that they have to deal with some of these issues.
Yes, thank you for bringing that up. There are so many different ways that it can be difficult. Like there's not just like one category, and something that might be hard for one person might not necessarily be hard for another, and that doesn't make it any less valid.
Right, absolutely.
Yeah. So I know you've had some experience where you found stuff out about your family that you maybe didn't want to know. Would you be willing to share what that experience was like, learning that?
Yeah, sure. So almost all of my family is from the South. So the inherent nature of being a Southerner is that you're going to find some sort of connection to slavery. And really, as Americans, if you have ancestors that were here before 1865, in some way, your ancestors were impacted by slavery, period. Regardless of whether you're in the North or in the South, if you were buying cotton, if you bought clothes, if you did anything, your life was impacted by the effects of slavery. But as a Southerner, I know that all of my ancestors were immediately impacted by slavery, and benefited from slavery and the enslaving of other human beings. So I think going into genealogy, I knew that that was my reality, right? I knew that I was going to find that. I knew it. So it wasn't shocking. What's more shocking is kind of as you're looking at documents, and I think this is true for both the descendants of enslavers and the descendants of the enslaved, we have to kind of null our feelings. We have to kind of table it, or else we can't get through the document. If every time I see the fact that my ancestor thought of another person's ancestor as a piece of property, just a more valuable piece of property, if every time I saw that, I took the appropriate emotional response, I wouldn't be able to do genealogy. I have to kind of table those emotions. And that's one of those things that I notice more often. And that can be really challenging. I noticed this year, I was watching the Harriet movie. And so good. Really, really good. And I found myself getting emotional. Like I had to pause the movie. Like I had a very visceral emotional response that I wasn't expecting. And I think it's because that day I was knee deep in chancery records with my ancestors reading about the enslaved. And I think that that's a real thing. And I have to create space for myself to deal with those emotions.
Yes. You bring up really two like super important steps in processing that kind of information. The first is to compartmentalize a little bit, so that you can get through it, because it's so important that you learn the history, that you look at the records. You don't want to just ignore it, but then also to, like you said, to open up that space and allow yourself to feel those feelings. And you have to have both steps in the process. You can't have one without the other, I think.
Yeah, very true.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that with us. When I talked with Sam yesterday during our tech run, I shared with him an experience I'd had recently where I'd been learning just this last weekend stuff I didn't necessarily know about close relatives that made me feel a little concerned, because I wasn't sure if I should still be proud of being a descendant. I didn't know how to feel about that. Like, I still love them because they're a family, but I was having a really hard time reconciling those two things. And Sam shared with me his insight on how you can love someone as they are in the present, and their past doesn't necessarily have to affect your view of them now. Do you want to elaborate a little bit more on that?
Yeah, sure. So one of the things, there's two different circumstances where we can have something like this in our family. One is looking back at our ancestors and seeing, oh wow, I know all these things about them, and then I discovered blank, whatever it is. And do I still want to keep digging deeper? Do I still like them as much? That's one situation. Another is a person in our own life that we're close with, and we know them with the experiences that we've had with them, and then we discover something about their past. And now we're still in this living relationship with this person, but we're also have to grappling with the truth about something about them. And the way that I look at it is our job as genealogists, our job as family members, is not to be the judge in the tribunal. Our job is not to be God. Our job is not to say, you're good, you're bad, as if somehow I have the moral wherewithal to make those decisions.
Yeah.
We don't. All we know is our experience with that person. If they're a living person, we operate out of the experience and the relationship that we have with them. I have plenty of people that I'm able to have good relationships with in my family that other people in my family have had very painful experiences with. And again, it's sort of like that situation with slavery. I have to, in certain ways, table my emotions, table my knowledge in order to get to know that person that's standing before me. But at the end of the day, I have to do that with myself, right? If I were to judge myself from all of my negative decisions all the time, it would be debilitating. Right? I mean, we're not perfect. If I'm not perfect, I can't expect my ancestors. I can't expect my immediate family to be perfect either. And I think once I allow for imperfection, then I can love them in their imperfection.
Mhm. Yeah, it's all about grace. I love how, like, if you could sum it up, it would be like, if you can give grace to yourself, give grace to your ancestors, then you can learn how to give grace to yourself.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I have to do that all the time. I can love different aspects of people and try to forgive them for other things.
Mm-hmm.
But I also have to call a spade when I see it, right? I have to be able to say, I love this person in my life, but they really made some bad decisions. And I then will hope that I won't make those same decisions.
Yeah. Well. One of the cool things about learning your family history, I think, is that you get to, learn from their history, and you can say, you know what, I'm not going to make those same choices in the future. So even if it's hard, still learning those difficult stories can help you become a better person.
And I would say one way that's the case is, as we're looking at certain things in our family, and maybe we see patterns. We see one example, as I mentioned, one of those problems is addiction or mental illness. If we're looking at our family and we're seeing these different cycles or these different patterns of things that are going on, it then puts the ball in our court, and it says, all right, what are you going to do with this information? How are you going to change bad habits that have been taught? Because a lot of times these different things within family, these different family dynamics of how to deal with certain emotions. If all your life you've been taught that when you're angry, you just let it out. Or if you've been taught you're sad or you're angry, therefore you need to go into your room and isolate. Other people are taught, I've had a long day, I'm going to have a drink. As if somehow that's the way that you manage emotions. We're taught a lot of things kind of not directly, but indirectly, and those indirect lessons are passed down generationally. And so if we can stop them when we learn about it, it helps us and our future descendants as well.
Yeah, I agree. You can be the break in the chain.
Absolutely.
And I see my friends do that. They'll post sometimes on social media and they'll say, you know what, there's a long history of abuse in my family, and I'm not going to continue that. And I have a lot of respect for people who do that.
And we have to know our history first. Know that we have a chain that we can break.
Yeah.
So that's where family history comes in. Like, without that knowledge, we won't have the power to impact change in our family.
Yeah. Yeah. And because I feel like a lot of times in the genealogy family history community, we talk about how it's important to learn about your ancestors because they're who you are. So it can be, when you learn something that's not particularly savory, you can say, oh, does that mean that's who I am? But you have to remember that in that realm of conversation, you still have choice. No matter what, you've got choice. Yeah,
and one of the things that I mentioned in a blog post that I had about mental illness and genealogy is we need to be able to, when we're looking at records, when we're looking at our ancestors, we need to be willing to not look away. To not look away from the unsavory, because our immediate I don't want to go there. I don't want to go down that path. I'd rather not look there. And sometimes I think for the genealogist, we need to be willing to look, but also provide space and grace for those other people in our family that don't want to go there, and accept that that's their choice as well. Yeah.
It's okay. Like, sometimes self-care is that you just don't look at it at all, and that's okay. As we talk, I was thinking about, for those who believe in an afterlife, I like to imagine that the choices that I make today maybe help my ancestors feel a little bit better, because I'm sure some of them are up there feeling guilty about choices that they made in their life. And if they can see that their descendants are choosing to live differently, that they'll be a little bit more at ease.
Yeah, I think that's a great thing to think about, right? It's how we can honor our ancestors by making decisions that maybe they would have liked to have made had they had more time to make those decisions or had more life experiences to change.
Yes, yeah. And then yesterday we talked a lot about DNA tests. So it's still on the same topic, but a little bit of a jump. We talked about DNA tests and how that can be kind of a nuanced situation. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah, so I love DNA testing. I think DNA testing is the gateway drug that got me into genealogy. So I was always interested, but it was what really propelled me. It was like catapulted me into it. And so I started buying DNA tests for everybody in my family. It was like, I don't have much money, but the money I'll have, I'll buy a DNA test. So in doing that, though, we initially, I didn't think about the importance of guiding those people that are getting those DNA tests and saying, hey, you might just get the information that I need for my research, but you also might find out unexpected things. And the longer I'm in this world and in this community, I'm realizing that when I buy a DNA test for someone, I need to tell them, hey, you might find out something that you weren't expecting, and give them some options of some of those things that they might find out. You know, you might find out someone in your family had a child that you didn't know about. You might find out that you're not biologically related to someone that you think you are. Are you okay with that? Are you willing to take that risk? And if they are, then move forward with the DNA testing. But if we just simply say, hey, just spit in this tube and send it off, and then they find out something that really upsets them, in a way, that's on us, because we know better. We do know that that's a possibility, and they didn't. So we have to be the educated person there that's willing to be an educator and put up those potential flags for people. But also, I mean, honestly, I do think personally that the risks aren't as great as the benefits in DNA testing, but that's for me personally. Other people have to make that decision with proper information.
Yeah, they deserve that for sure. They deserve to know what they might be getting themselves into, for better or for worse.
Yeah.
And then what would you say about like the importance of community within genealogy as it relates to that?
So one thing, and I've also written about this on my blog, I love the genealogy community. I think that we're awesome.
I think so too.
You know, I think there's a lot of people that not only want to just dork out together because we like looking at old records, and you're like, wow, I found this great record in a chancery record, and you're like, whoa, tell me about it. You know? But we're also a group of people that I think are concerned about relationships and making relationships and with our ancestors in the past and with our living ancestors now or relatives, and also making connections with people we didn't even know were family. And I can meet a DNA cousin and be like, hey, cuz, you know, and it's immediate. But that community is so important, because when we do have issues, when we do discover something unexpected, our community, our genealogy community, are the people that we're going to want to lean on when we might not feel that support somewhere else. There's a really great episode on Black Pro Gen, and they talked about discovering the unexpected in your family. And it was the genealogy community in those situations that held the support for those people. Otherwise, they wouldn't have known how to get through it, because their known family, they felt they couldn't trust in a lot of situations. So our genealogy community are maybe just our friends and our family. Also, you know, another, for us, when we do deal with some of this unexpected surprises and having difficulties in what we discover, healing is possible, but not alone. We can't, of our own strength, get through a lot of this stuff. We need help from someone else, and we need to know where to look. So if you are a member of a spiritual community, being able to get spiritual guidance. If you need and you recognize that you need mental health assistance from a mental health professional, you need to be able to seek that out. But also the community here, whether it's on Twitter, on Instagram, or going to a conference and meeting with someone, staying connected to your friends that you meet at a conference, all of those things are helpful in sorting through some of the discoveries that we make.
Yeah, I agree. And I hope that the Facebook group that we share this in, I hope that can be that for you guys. I hope you know that you can always reach out to me if you find something that's difficult, and even just to get it off your chest. I see it on Twitter a lot. There's a really great genealogy community on Twitter. And people will say, hey, you know what, I'm feeling kind of down tonight because I found this out about my family, and everyone will just kind of flock towards them and express their love and care. Some of the links that Sam's talked about are in the comments if you guys want to check those out, including the episode from Black Progen and his blog, which I forgot to mention earlier, the Orthodox Genealogist. Definitely go check that out. I'm trying to remember if there was anything else I particularly wanted to ask before we move on to your experiences with this experiment. A quick thought that I had was I have my fan chart over here next to me, and I was looking at it earlier today, and there's so many people on it, and that's only as far back as the generations that I know. And even though not everyone in that fan chart is not everyone's a picture perfect ancestor, they still got me here. I'm still here because of them, and I can be grateful just for that. I see that a lot on Mother's Day recently. People were like, you know what, I don't have a great relationship with my mother, but I can be grateful that because of her, I'm here, and that's all I need to experience.
Absolutely. Yeah, there was, that reminds me of yesterday's word for day 20 of the About Me experiment page. And it was about gratitude. And knowing about your family history can help you find things to be grateful for. And like you said, even though we don't have all of our generations filled out in our tree, that one person whose name we don't have, without that person, I wouldn't exist. Without that nameless individual, I wouldn't be here. So it's that randomness is still something that it kind of makes me want to learn more about them. And like you said, without that one ancestor that I might want nothing to do with, without that one person, I wouldn't be here. So I can be grateful for their existence at the very least. But I also, at the same time, I can't demand that other people are grateful for the same thing.
That's true.
Right? People, when they discover that they're descended from an enslaver, or they came about through a situation of rape, I mean, I can't tell someone, you need to be grateful for that person's existence, right? But if they come to feel that way, I'll support them in that. I think it just depends on the person.
Yes. And thank you to everyone who's been joining in the conversation in the comments down below. Special shout out to Lisa, Christine. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. They are, I don't know if you can see the comments, Sam, but they are expressing gratitude for this kind of conversation. And I'm glad that people can relate to it. As we've gone throughout this experiment, we've been trying to bring on people who can bring on a different perspective than maybe the traditional view of family history. So we've had people like you that can share about difficult discoveries, and Wendy, who is able to share about, having a tree that doesn't have roots, that's a little bit more horizontal than vertical. So because those different insights are really, really important. So is there anything else you want to share before we talk about the experiment about difficult discoveries?
I just had a thought, and I think I lost it. But I think one thing I was going to say, this is what it was. We're in the middle of a pandemic, right? There's a lot of grief that people are experiencing and that they're going through right now. One of the things that I found also as talking about that genealogy community and supporting each other is, and it's what we're seeing in the fruit with the 21-day experiment, is we're all struggling in different ways. We're all just trying to deal right now, right? Like,
Yeah.
how do we deal with this normal that we're experiencing? So, I guess the thing I wanted to say is give yourself grace, give yourself time to just feel or not. Give yourself that space to not feel that you need to be super productive right now. You don't have to be, on Family Search or Ancestry or MyHeritage every minute of a day just because you're at home right now.
Yeah.
And you can't go anywhere else. It's okay if you don't have the stomach for family history right now. That's okay. Table it, and maybe after this, when you have a little bit more emotional strength, you'll be able to go back to it. So I just wanted to share that don't feel that you need to feel on fire for family history right now. You might feel that again afterwards. You might have more right now because you have more time.
Yeah.
But give yourself that grace.
Oh, that's so important. This is the last day, and I hope that as people are reflecting on their 21 days, that they're still proud of themselves, even if they haven't done it every day. I know I haven't done it every day. But it's okay. It's all about progress. And if you, like you said, if it's not time for you right now to do it, that's okay too. So tell me about your experiences with the experiment. What have you been working on? What have you learned and done?
Yeah. So I have my journal right here. I want to show you my journal.
Yes.
So this is my journal. And
is that the Footprints in the Sand poem?
Yeah. So
Nice.
this was given to me by my aunt, and my aunt passed away a few years ago, and she gave it to me, and she wrote on the front page, and I feel kind of emotional thinking about it. I graduated from the Greek Orthodox Seminary in 2013, and when I graduated, she gave me this journal she said to write my prayers to God and my special thoughts. And I just couldn't. I couldn't use it. I didn't want to dirty it up. I didn't want to mess it up. And so for 7 years, I've left it to just look at. And my aunt wouldn't have wanted me to just look at it. Right?
Yeah.
Like, she gave it to me for a purpose. She told me the purpose. And I think as I've grappled with grief and I've acknowledged her loss in certain ways, but her presence in other ways still, I decided with this experiment to use the journal. So I've been writing in it every day, the reflections from each of those things, and it's been really nice because
you chose the About Me plan, right?
I did the About Me plan. And what was really great about that is, first off, it felt a little, initially I was like, should I do the About Me plan? That sounds kind of self-absorbed. And then I was like, no, because how is anyone going to know if I don't tell them who I am? If we don't document ourselves, our ancestors will have to rely on digital records to discover who we are. And I don't know if that's what I want them to think about. So it was great. The first day I wrote my timeline. And I would say maybe that's my favorite thing, was writing out my timeline of my life and seeing it in black and white. I think my first reflection, and I said this to my sister after doing my timeline, is I said, look, I so often, because there's a lot of things from my childhood that were troubling and difficult. And a lot of times I live in that period of difficulty. I live in those years emotionally, and I respond to different things in my life through the lens of that 8-year-old, that 9-year-old. But I've lived so many great things since then. I've gone through so much, right? I've experienced so much. And I have so much more strength from that time after that I can see my life through the lens of those things. So I told my sister, I said, look, looking at my timeline, I have so much more to be proud of than to have to live as if I'm bound by a couple of troubling years.
Yeah.
So I think that was a huge thing. That was a huge.
That's super cool.
Yeah. And also just looking at being able to write out lessons that I've learned from my mom and lessons I've learned from my dad. And I think we don't think about that very often. We're just like, yeah, that's my dad, that's my mom.
Yeah.
And maybe they don't think about it either, like as if maybe they didn't teach us anything. To be able to write it out, like, hey, I learned this from my mom, I learned this from my dad. I think I'm excited to share that with them.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think I think of those things unless it's like Mother's Day or Father's Day. Well, I guess I do think about it.
Yeah, like let me write it in the card. Yeah.
On those days. Well, I'm so glad you joined the experiment and that you were able to promote it widely, and really appreciate your efforts there. And thank you for everything that you've said today on this live. And thank you to those of us, those who have joined. If you have had a great experience with this experiment, or maybe not so, we'd love to hear about it. If you want to send us a message or in the comments, and let us know your thoughts on how connecting with your family has gone. This has been a really great 21 days, and I hope that you guys will continue to try to connect with your ancestors. And thanks again to Sam for being here today. Any last words before we go?
Well, thanks for having me. I really enjoyed the 21-day experiment. Before that, we also had like a 6-day or 7 days of indexing. That was really fun, right? I think we need more of these different avenues for our community to connect outside of conferences when we can't always be together. And my last thing, I just wanted to share, like, if anyone wants to connect with me, they can connect with me on Twitter, on Instagram, with my blog. And if anyone has Virginia ancestors, reach out to me. I love doing research for fellow Virginians, and I'd love to connect with any of y'all at the next conference.
Yeah, I really hope we can have Roots Tech again.
Yeah, God willing.
Hopefully that happens.
Yeah.
I'll keep that in my prayers. Well, thank you to everyone who joined us for this live today and for the experiment. We are so, so grateful for all of you. Sending my love and signing off.